Hello Raptors fans and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we are going to be discussing the first of the doubleheader against the Miami Heat. But before we do that, I want to talk about optimism. I want to paint a rosy picture for you guys and let you know why I think that the Toronto Raptors are poised to start winning games in the very near future, because the time has come. Yes, this was the final game of the 4-game road trip that the Toronto Raptors were on prior to the 7-game homestand that will be happening from now until mid-December. So this is a good time to think and reflect about how the Toronto Raptors are going to put together, in my opinion, a little mini run. I'm not expecting the Raptors to win every game in the 7-game homestand. Particularly, there are some games against very difficult opponents, such as the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Knicks, and they're probably unfavored in those games, let's just put it that way. But for a team that's 5-15, the Toronto Raptors have looked actually halfway decent this season. I know it's kind of putting lipstick on a pig. Maybe it's something that you don't want to hear, because at the end of the day, wins are wins and losses are losses. But when you want to extrapolate and predict for the future, it's important to look beyond the win-loss column, because there are certain ways that teams can win and there are certain ways that teams can lose that portend well and portend poorly. If the Toronto Raptors were getting stomped and giving up and the team looked dysfunctional, didn't look ready to compete, or there were major issues with morale, that kind of thing, it would be very easy to say that this season is just completely cooked, that we should be looking down the line. We should simply lick our wounds and wait until the offseason to hope for better days. But I'm going to tell you right now why I think that the Toronto Raptors stand a pretty good chance of having a small bounce back that will make the games worth watching over the next 7 games. And so first of all, we will start with some lineup data, because I looked at some of the lineup data. I was very curious to see how the core elements of the team were looking when digging down on the stats. How are they playing together? Are they making each other better? Do the core components of the team complement one another? Is it something that you can extrapolate from and perhaps paint a picture out of? So let's take a look at the first piece of lineup data. So the first piece of lineup data are 2-man lineups. 2-man lineups have the most data, the most minutes, because you are cutting out fewer of the minutes when you have a lineup with only 2 players in it. You can count all of the minutes that those players shared the floor together. You don't have to eliminate any with the higher player lineup data. So let's take a look. And the ones that I'm very curious about, the projected starters: Jakob Poeltl, Scottie Barnes, and RJ Barrett. Those are the 3 players that I'm going to be drilling down on exclusively. Those are the 3 players that I am pretty confident are going to remain in the starting lineup. Those are the players that have been playing a lot of the minutes recently, so it's probably going to be something that continues as the Toronto Raptors play more games. So looking at the 2-man lineup data, it's not a very rosy picture. So Jakob Poeltl and Scottie Barnes have a -3 net rating. So net rating is that per 100 possessions, when you factor in how much the Raptors allow and how much the Raptors score, it takes the sum total of when you add those two together. So the Raptors get outscored by 3.2 points per 100 possessions when those two share the floor. And faring not much better, which is actually quite surprising to me. I figured that perhaps Scottie Barnes and Jakob Poeltl did not have great synergy together, but RJ Barrett and Jakob Poeltl, who have had great synergy in the pick and roll, are just ahead of the Scottie Barnes and Jakob Poeltl lineup with -3.1 net rating. And then moving up a little bit further, it's a little bit better of a picture, but it's not a great picture. The Scottie Barnes RJ Barrett tandem is -0.6 net rating. So off to a bad start. One of the things that I will mention that I think is important to point out is that when you have 2 players playing together, you are not eliminating many minutes. Those 2 players, if they are on the floor and you are losing a game, the likelihood that those players are in the negatives is higher. Most of the players on the Toronto Raptors have a negative net rating because, surprise, the Raptors are 5-15. And the way that you get to that total is by losing minutes. You let the other team score more than you score yourself. It's not that complicated. If you're losing games, generally the players who play most of the minutes on the team will have negative net ratings. So when you don't eliminate some of the minutes, you're going to get some of that baked in as well. How well and how poorly are those players playing in regards to their teammates? Is there dyssynergy there, or is it simply, are they carrying the burden of the rest of the team? That is something that we want to dig down on a little bit further. So maybe we'll start with the bad news first. The second thing that we are going to look at is the three-man data. So the three guys that I was looking at today, Ochai Barrett, Jakob Poeltl, Scottie Barnes. When you isolate for those three players playing together, it actually produces a positive net rating. So in 117 minutes, so smaller sample size, not one of the most used lineups, and the reason for that is because Scottie Barnes has been out with injury for the majority of the season. You're not going to get a ton of minutes with those three players playing together, but on the positive side, they have a plus net rating. So when you isolate for those three players, and those three players playing alongside one another, and probably buoyed by last night's very good performance from the three of them against the Heat, they have a positive net rating of 1.7. That means that when the Raptors have those three players on the court, they outscore their opponents by 1.7 points per 100 possessions. So that is a positive thing to take away from that. And lastly, we'll look at the four-man lineup data. And this one, you have to lower the minute count. And the reason for that is because these are more selective. You are eliminating far more minutes. When these four players play together, you are eliminating all the other lineups when, say, one player is missing from the lineup. You can't count those minutes. So this is exclusively when those four players are playing on the court at the same time. And the best Toronto Raptors four-man lineup, when you filter for 50 minutes, Jakob Poeltl, Ochai Barrett, Ochai Agbaji, and Scottie Barnes. That is their best four-man lineup, where they outscore their opponents by 4.6 points per 100 possessions, which is very good news if you are going to look at a team that is going to start getting healthy and playing at home. We are going to start seeing that lineup quite a bit. That will probably be the Toronto Raptors starting lineup when the Raptors resume play against the Heat tomorrow. You shouldn't go completely by the stats. I think you should use your critical thinking ability. And when you think about it, this lineup makes a lot of sense. So three of the players within the starting lineup, so Poeltl, Barrett, and Scottie Barnes, are good passers. Scottie Barnes and Ochai Barrett are good creators. They like to get inside and make plays for other players. Ochai Barrett is kind of a defensive liability. And so when you think about those factors, who is a good perimeter defender who can also space the floor for the players who like to go inside? Okay, 3-and-D. That is a major building block for most of the successful lineups in the NBA today. Well, of course, Ochai Agbaji would be a great role player to put alongside those three other players. And it makes sense. He can take on the strongest perimeter player on the opposing team. And then when Ochai Barrett and Scottie Barnes drive into the paint, he is an excellent corner three-point shooter. So that makes complete sense to me. I think that he should be in the starting lineup moving forward. I think that this is good evidence for that. And I think that as you start to eliminate some of the other lineups and move closer and closer towards what I believe is an ideal lineup for the Toronto Raptors from a winning perspective, then you start to see that the Raptors are actually winning their minutes and winning them pretty decisively. So there's news about Immanuel Quickley returning. The timeline for him was scheduled to be about a month, and that timeline has not changed. He's projected to be back on the team about halfway through December, so coinciding with around the end of the Toronto Raptors homestand. So for at least the near future, the Toronto Raptors will be without Immanuel Quickley. On the other hand, as I mentioned, I thought that Bruce Brown would be returning on this road trip, but of course he did not return. And Kelly Olynyk also did not return. So it's still up in the air whether those two who were sitting on the sideline, they are quite the characters. They look like they're straight out of a TV show. I mentioned that in one of my tweets last night. But I'm hoping to see them return to action because I'd like to see what they can bring to the team, if there's any little wrinkles that they add to the bench that perhaps could lift them up there. I'm curious to see whether they will be difference makers, whether they're going to be rusty coming back, and perhaps As the season winds on, if they do produce, whether the Raptors are going to be able to trade them, maybe extend them, we'll see what happens there. But I'm curious to see what those players are going to do when they return to the lineup. But I thought that was a bit of interesting data to share with you, the homestand plus the lineup data that I showed you, that might give you a little bit of hope about the Toronto Raptors in the near future. Anyway, let's move on to the player evaluations. So all three of the Toronto Raptors' best players deserve to be mentioned first, but I believe we'll start with Scottie Barnes because not only did he have a good offensive game, he is also a very good defender. So in terms of two-way impact and just making a difference on the floor, I think that we will start with him. 24 points from Scottie Barnes, triple-double, so 10 rebounds, 10 assists. He was efficient, 24 points on 15 shots. He was 3 of 8 from 3. He hit all of his free throws except for one. Then he had a steal, a block, but unfortunately 5 turnovers, which, 2-to-1 turnover ratio, that's acceptable. I thought that Scottie Barnes had a very good overall game last night. And while he did shoot 8 threes, Scottie Barnes, of course, one of the big swing skills for him, one of the big difference-making skills for him is his three-point shot, because if he becomes a consistent three-point shooter, he is, his ceiling is a lot higher than if he doesn't. So I understand that he wants to flex his muscle in that area, and he wants to show that he can shoot the ball. And he did last night. 3 of 8 is a good percentage. I still think that perhaps he needs to tone down the number of threes that he takes. And again, when he's sharing the floor with other players that like to use the paint, it makes sense that he would want to shoot the ball. So when he's playing with Jakob Poeltl, when he's playing with RJ Barrett, those two players are interior scorers first and foremost. RJ Barrett has actually rediscovered his shot a little bit over the past couple of games, and he is starting to make more of his threes, so it's not as dire in that circumstance when he's playing off of the ball. I think last season was when RJ Barrett really showed that he could be an off-ball spacer because his catch and shoot percentage was quite good. He was being a very good floor spacer for Scottie Barnes. So perhaps if it gets back to that, where they are taking turns or using the ball in different scenarios, then they space for the other one. So in that aspect, I understand. However, there was a shot in the second half of last game where Scottie Barnes did kind of like a LeBron-style look down and then turn and immediately fire the shot at the rim 3. Do you practice that shot? Is that going to go in enough to make that worth it? If it comes from a kick out where someone touches the paint and he is spacing off of the ball and he can catch and shoot, thumbs up. Love that kind of shot. If it is off the dribble, I don't like that as much. And I understand that if teams are going under the screen and really spacing you, that it is good to take three-point shots. So again, it comes down to quality. If Scottie Barnes is taking threes where the player is playing far off of him, going way under the screen, or really daring him to shoot, I think that is an acceptable shot. If his defender is sufficiently far enough away that they aren't able to recover and contest the shot, then that is a good shot, and that is a shot that I'm totally happy with him taking. If he's taking a shot where his defender is a couple of feet away from him and is able to make a close contest, I just don't think that that's something that he should be doing. He should be using his ability to drive into the paint and try and create a different shot. If it's not for you, maybe it's for a teammate. It doesn't have to be a layup attempt. You can reset the offense if it's not too late in the shot clock, that kind of thing. So I think Scottie Barnes is working through it. I think that he is trying to discover and figure out what works for him. And in my opinion, I'm okay with that. I don't think that the stakes aren't incredibly high right now. I would rather him try and figure it out at this moment than maybe a couple years down the line. I just don't want him to develop bad habits where he is regularly taking shots that I don't agree with. But I've spent a lot of time discussing kind of Scottie Barnes' shooting habits and didn't really discuss the good things that he did. Scottie Barnes is an excellent defender. He's a very good help defender. He's a good on-ball defender, especially against those mid-sized opponents, guys who aren't guards and aren't true bigs. Even against the bigger players, the Heat are not a very large team, so it's almost ideal for him. He can guard most of the players on the Heat. And then he's a very good defensive rebounder. 9 defensive rebounds. He gets in there and mixes it up, and he is the one usually that after Poeltl sweeps the paint and boxes out the opposing center, in this case Bam Adebayo, Scottie can elevate and grab the rebound. So that's very helpful for the Toronto Raptors defense. You always have to mention Scottie Barnes' defense because that is a huge element to his game. And then the 10 assists. Scottie Barnes had so many great assists last night, the most impressive of which was when he was triple teamed. It looked like he was trapped along the baseline, and he no-look passed over his head, went all the way out to the three-point line. So he was under the basket on the opposite side of the floor, right on the baseline, and he did a Jokic pass, skip pass all the way out to the three-point line to set up an open three-point shot. So the guy has a special court mapping talent that you only see from the very top offensive players in the league. That can really make your offense explode. It can make you look so much more dangerous. And the fact that he is making difficult passes that create real opportunities, is something that excites me. He is not trying safe passes, just driving kicks, although he does do that as well. He is trying to thread the needle, make difficult passes that can create real scoring opportunities. And he did that a lot last night, ended up with a triple-double. Very pleased with his performance. I thought he was the player of the game for the Raptors. Next up, we'll talk about RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett, 25 points, 8 on 18 shots, very efficient. He was 2 of 4 from 3. He's rediscovering his three-point shot. He was 3 of 4 from the line, so that's great, 75%, I'll take it. 6 rebounds, 7 assists with 6 turnovers, so not a great assist-to-turnover ratio, but he is certainly one of the engines that drives the Toronto Raptors forward, and the Heat are a tough defensive team. They like to play different schemes, lots of schemes that protect the house, keep teams out of the paint, and Bam Adebayo is obviously a very good rim protector and can move his feet and track players from the perimeter. So on the surface, you would assume that this would be maybe a difficult game for RJ Barrett. I was assuming that maybe he would have another one of those road games where he wasn't very effective, but that wasn't the case. He was very effective driving to the basket all night long. His finishing looked great. I think he was fouled quite a few times going to the rim, and it wasn't called. Especially the whistle seemed a little unbalanced, like he got hit and bumped and all that kind of thing. And then on the other end, he walked in with his hands up, slid with Jaime Jaquez, and Jaime Jaquez got an and one. There was just a complete phantom foul called on RJ Barrett, where Jimmy Butler was in transition and he just smoked a layup, like completely missed it. There was no foul whatsoever. They called a foul on him. That's the kind of just inconsistent reffing that I've come to expect. In terms of what the Raptors are getting out of RJ Barrett, I am very pleased. He's had very high highs, he's had very low lows this season, but when you average it out, he has been a positive player for the Toronto Raptors. In last night's game, he was very good against a very good defense. I am pleased with his development. I think that he has a lot of potential as a lead guard in the NBA. Very happy with him. Next up, we'll talk about Jakob Poeltl, who maybe I should have put him second because I think he had a stellar night. 24 points on 11 field goals. He missed one shot from the field and one shot from the free throw line. He was 4 of 5 from the free throw line. 10 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block, only 2 turnovers. He fouled out of the game, but it was at the end of the game when it was kind of over anyway. He was great. He was very good. I thought he played excellent defense on Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo made a couple of difficult 3-point shots, which definitely helped him out on the score sheet. He was not by any means getting easy baskets on Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl was picking him up from half court. So obviously the Heat like to run a lot of plays through Bam Adebayo. He finished with a triple-double last night as well, although you can see maybe at the end of the game how they got him that triple-double, how the sausage was made, and it wasn't pretty. But he is a very good playmaker, and they like to run a lot of plays with the ball in his hands, and he brought the ball up a couple of times last night, and Jakob Poeltl showing off his foot speed. Very good for a 7-footer. He is able to backpedal very quickly, especially on players at center size like Bam Adebayo. Bam scored 14 points on 16 shots. Jakob Poeltl was there in his way, except for one play when Bam got a dunk off of a screen and the help defense was late, but you can't really blame that on Poeltl. I thought that he moved his feet super well, stayed in front of Bam pretty much all night long. And it's not just about Bam, because as I've mentioned many times, it is about whether the other team is able to score in the paint. He is doing the Marc Gasol thing. Marc Gasol obviously was never a big-time shot blocker. What he would do is that he had a very large body, and he would just, like a chess piece, just put it in the correct spot. It's all about positioning. When you are 7 feet tall, you're a true center, a guy with a very large body. You don't have to jump. You don't even have to block shots. What you have to do is be in the right spot and put your hands up over your head in front of the other player. And when you do that, the other team's shooting percentage is just going to go down. That's just how it works. They can't see the basket. They have to adjust their shot to get it over your hands. He does a very good job of that. And on the rebounding front, I've already mentioned it, Scottie Barnes had 9 defensive rebounds. A lot of that is because of the boxing out from Jakob Poeltl. Offensively, he's struggled the past couple of games as the Raptors have tried to work out how they can integrate Scottie Barnes, RJ Barrett, and Jakob Poeltl into the mix. And I think that they did a good job. The Heat blitzed a couple of pick and rolls, and he was able to make himself big for the pass. He caught it, and then he used that extremely accurate floater of his. He is very good at finding areas in the paint where he can get that shot off, and it was another good performance from him. Very happy that Jakob Poeltl had a bounce back game after 2 suboptimal games, so good performance from him. Next up, we'll talk Ochai Agbaji, and he was kind of the unsung hero this game because, well, it's not a huge box score number. 13 points is kind of right around where his average is on the season, but he was great. 13 points on 8 shots. He was 3 of 4 from 3-point range, really did a good job spacing the floor. 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 0 turnovers. The only issue is that, again, he's not a lockdown defender. It's not like you can put him on the other team's best perimeter player and he's just going to turn their water off. So he was guarding Tyler Hero for a decent chunk of the night. He was also guarding Duncan Robinson. They switch a lot of the matchups and rotate the defenders around a little bit, but Tyler Hero did have a pretty good game, and although he was being guarded by Ochai Agbaji, at certain points they switched Davion Mitchell onto him, but Tyler Hero had a very good game. He's just a very, very good player. He has really emerged this season and has taken a big step, averaging 23 points. And so he matched that total with 23 points last night on efficient shooting. On 18 shots, he was 40% from 3. So it's very difficult to completely shut him off. That pick and roll action between him and Bam Adebayo is so deadly. So obviously Ochai Agbaji was one of the primary defenders on him, but again, they mix it up. They also switch a lot of screens, which makes it difficult to keep track of like how effective one guy is just by looking at the box score. He has been a plus for the Raptors on defense this season, and he made his threes last night, 3 of 4 from 3. You can't complain about that. I thought he had a good night. Last up, we have the rookie Jakob Poeltl, who had a great first game in the starting lineup. Last night was not as effective. He missed both of his 3-point shots. He had 6 points on 3 of 8 shooting. He did have a couple of very nice plays. He did a really nice tween dribble into dime to Jakob Poeltl. That was beautiful. It was all one motion, looked really fluid. I think that he has a high ceiling. I'm really liking just visually watching his game. There's a lot to like. He has some moves, and he has the body, and he looks like an NBA player. So I am excited to watch him grow, although last night it wasn't a great performance from a statistical standpoint. And I think that the Toronto Raptors are really missing one more shooter in the starting lineup, because when they went to the bench, we'll start right off talking about Davion Mitchell. He played 20 minutes, the most off of the bench, had 4 points on 2 of 4 shooting, and his lack of offense is difficult to ignore. He had a couple of nice drives. One of them looked kind of like an accident, like he just drove into the paint because he was chasing after the ball, and it worked out for him, so great. The other time he just blew past Duncan Robinson, abused his lack of foot speed, and laid it in. But he was also passing up threes, and when the game went to the fourth quarter, and the Raptors needed somebody to stretch the floor out for their 3 best players. You can't be passing up open threes. He only took 1 3-point shot, which he missed. You have to be able to make 3-point shots, especially if you're an off-ball player. And especially if you're an off-ball guard. Like, that is almost a requirement. And so if you aren't doing that and you're passing up shots there, that's a win for the defense. They helped on Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes kicks it out. And if you don't take the open 3, the defense goes, oh, amazing, I'm just going to keep doing that. The way that you punish the help is by shooting and making threes, and he wasn't able to do that. So although I think he was okay defensively, I mean, again, he was on Tyler Hero, who had a really good game. I think he makes a difference. He definitely gets up into guys and makes them have to work in order to create open shots for themselves. But I don't think he's making that much of an impact to make up for the fact that on the other end, he's not taking and making open 3-point shots. When he's had his best games of the season, he's provided that spacing. So he didn't bring it last night. Then the guy who really performed well off of the bench, and I thought had one of his better games of the season, was Jonathan Mobo, who had 7 points on 3 of 6 shooting. He made a 3. Hey, this guy is making threes now. This is, it's starting to creep into the territory of a bigger sample size where it's not simply a fluke. They are passing it to him. He is in the corner and he is taking the shot. That is a huge development. And then on the other end, the guy is a great defender. And he is also kind of like one of those off-ball bigs that is, like Poeltl, good at finding seams in the defense to make himself available for passes. So Scottie and he have good synergy, and Scottie made a very nice pass to Jonathan where he caught him right under the basket for a dunk. A lot of that is to do with the off-ball movement of Jonathan Mobo. The guy has his head screwed on straight. He knows what he should be doing on the floor. That is big, especially for one of your centers. You want them to know how to play the game. If he's not too big, but he is very solid, large, long wingspan, good motor, good foot speed. The guy has an NBA body, and if he has the smarts, he's going to be in the league for a long time just based on what he can do. And I thought he had a really good game. 3 rebounds. Again, he always seems to get at least 1 offensive rebound. He had 2 last night, 2 assists, 0 turnovers. Turnovers have been an issue for him, and 0 fouls. He has maybe started to turn the corner in that respect, because a lot of the time he gets baited into jumping and trying to block shots that way, but that didn't happen last night. I thought he had a great game, especially from a defensive standpoint. Jamison Battle didn't have the explosive game that he had against the Pelicans. Of course, very hard to replicate. And in fact, he had 5 points on 5 shots. He only made 1 of his threes. All of his shots were threes. He did some stuff out there. He can play a little bit with the ball. If you run him off of the line, he can make decent passes, easy reads. He's not just a standstill stiff that's just only shooting 3-point shots. But again, he's a specialist, and you kind of give him his flowers when he's making his threes and say he didn't have a great game when he's not. He's probably shown up on the scouting report. You can't leave this guy open, so there's other elements that he brings to the table, like the spacing that he provides, but not a fantastic game from him. Chris Boucher, pretty miserable performance, probably his worst game of the season. He had 3 points on 5 shots, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 turnovers. His off-ball defense last night was a big-time problem, especially in the fourth quarter, but just throughout the game. He left players open via helping a little too much. And just like RJ Barrett, you can kind of forgive a little bit when that happens if they're really pitching in on the offensive side, and he didn't last night, so pretty poor performance from him. And he's had a couple of games now in a row where he really has not delivered the punch that the Raptors have needed off of the bench. So unfortunate. And that was the game, pretty much. I really liked how the Raptors battled back. I think that this was a scrappy game. Of course, the Heat are always going to bring the effort. They're very well coached, and they have a good system, and they can play within that system very well. And although it's not always pretty, they can manufacture buckets just based on the movement that they create, the shooting that they have, the passing of Bam Adebayo with the dribble handoffs. They're deadly with that. And then on defense, they just muck up the game. They force you to shoot the ball. The Raptors had a pretty good night from 3 last night. They shot 38% from 3, so not a disastrous performance from them, but a lot of the shots are open because of Miami's defensive scheme. And I thought this was a game that the bench kind of lost The starters were quite good. The top three, Barnes, Poeltl, and RJ, played very well. And when the bench gave up the lead, the starters got it back. In the third and fourth quarters, they really played very tough basketball, got a lot of clutch stops, and then made a lot of plays on offense, and brought the Raptors right back into it. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. The Heat were able to pull away, but it was an encouraging game. I don't think that was one where you're, cursing the gods and it was horrible to watch or anything like so many of the games against the Heat can be. I think it was enjoyable to watch. I think the Raptors' best players played very well, and unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. The Heat had got really good performances from Tyler Hero and Jimmy Butler. Those guys both played really well, and they were able to outlast the Raptors. And the Toronto Raptors play them again tomorrow at 6 o'clock, so we get a bit of a matinee game. I'm excited to watch that one. I think the Raptors have a good chance of beating the Heat in Toronto. I saw enough competitive spark from the Raptors last night, and they weathered a couple of storms and brought it back. They have some fight. It's not as if the Heat are a juggernaut. They just play the right way and play well enough on both sides of the ball that eventually, if you're not sharp and you don't execute properly, they'll slowly grind you down and win the game. But I think that the Raptors can play that kind of game. I think that they have a strong offensive system. I think that they have shown that their defense is capable and can generate stops when needed, especially when Poeltl and Scottie are on the floor together. I think it'll come down to the second unit. The Toronto Raptors really did not get a very strong performance from their second unit after a great one versus the Pelicans. I think with a bit of home cooking when the Raptors are playing at home, role players and shooters tend to shoot better at home. I think that they can get a better performance from their second unit next game. So I'm excited to watch that one. And that is the video. What do you guys think about the lineup data? Are you encouraged by the fact that the Toronto Raptors' best players seem to play well together? Does it portend well for the Toronto Raptors on this home stretch? What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. I always love talking to other Raptors fans, and I'm very happy to answer your questions or your comments, so leave a comment there. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.